The California Eviction Moratorium is dead for the first time since April 6th, 2020, when the Judicial Council of the state of California put an eviction moratorium in place. We then had AB 3088, SB 91, and most recently AB 832. These have now all expired, and for the first time on October 1st, 2021, evictions can now move forward in the state of California. Hey there, Christian Walsh, Wire Associates. We're real estate agents based in Southern California, and we've been helping tenants and landlords and buyers and sellers since the beginning of the eviction moratorium help understand exactly what's going on in the state of California. We can't give tax or legal advice, but for the most honest and up-to-date real estate advice, subscribe to this channel. So we're here to let you know it has been a long road for landlords and a long road for a lot of tenants. Here we are at the point where evictions will be able to move forward. Now, it isn't completely true that all evictions were stopped. There were certain evictions that were moving forward after the Judicial Council actually opened things back up. But it was a very limited number, and a lot of folks were living and not paying rent, whether the tenants could not afford to pay rent or simply didn't want to pay rent. So here we are at the point where evictions can now move forward. This is a quick update for California landlords and California tenants, a guide to understand exactly what's going to happen next. And don't forget that if there is a local moratorium in place in your area, you may still have an eviction moratorium. So make sure you research that. Certain parts of California, they are still in place. So who can be evicted? Well, now there's a bigger group of folks who can be evicted, and they include those who haven't paid rent and didn't get 25% of monthly missed rent to their landlord by September 30th, 2021. And this was a stipulation set up in AB 832. Any rent that was missed between September 2020 and September 2021, so that's 13 months, any of the rent that was missed, as long as a tenant paid 25% of what they missed for any of those months, and they turned it in by the end of September 2021, they could not be evicted for non-payment of rent. But those folks who missed the deadline can now be evicted. Another group that can be evicted, and this is the biggest change, is anybody who doesn't pay full rent for October 2021 and months going forward. One of the biggest questions related to this payment of rent, whether it's October's rent or it's the rent that was due by September 30th, the 25%, a lot of tenants were reaching out asking for clarification, because they were waiting for approval. They had been waiting for a while for approval for rental assistance, or they were approved for rental assistance and the funds hadn't come in. Our best guess is that a landlord will not be able to evict if it is this far down the road on rental assistance for a tenant. As mentioned, there are new forms that will be used going forward October 1st. So instead of the 15-day notice that was required, along with a blank declaration that the tenant had to sign and turn in, those forms do not exist. Those are not in use anymore. It's a new 3-day pay or quit form with special language that must be used by landlords. How does a landlord recover any back rent that's owed? Well, starting November 1st, landlords will be able to take tenants to small claims court in order to recover the rental debt that is owed to the landlord. And the limitations on the dollar amount and the number of times annually that you can go to small claims court, those have been removed. So whatever the actual rent is, and no matter how many tenants there are, a landlord is able to go to small claims to attempt to recover those funds. The easier way for landlords to recover funds, if the tenant will cooperate, is to use housingiskey.com, the state's rental assistance site. If the tenant isn't cooperating, the landlord will be forced to use small claims court at this time. Hopefully, and this has been a big problem and a big question that a lot of landlords have asked, and that is, if the tenant isn't cooperating or the tenant has disappeared, am I still able to get rental assistance funds? My big hope, and I've been trying to get an answer from the state, is whether they will release any funds at the end to help out landlords in this situation. It appears, based on other content we've shared, that there's plenty of money there from the federal level. So hopefully, landlords, you'll be able to get that in the case of tenants who've disappeared or tenants who aren't cooperating. There's a big change that isn't getting as much press as some of the other expiring parts of the eviction moratorium, but this is a big one, and this is meant to be a quick update, so I can't go too deeply into it. But here's a quick overview. Essentially, what the eviction moratorium laws did is they expanded certain protections that were in the statewide law called the Tenant Protection Act, which is AB 1482. Under the eviction moratorium, essentially landlords could not evict for many no-fault reasons, and in some cases, in certain areas, they couldn't evict for at-fault reasons. So no fault means it's not the fault of the tenant. Basically, the landlord is going to do major repairs or maybe have family move in. That's no fault. At fault is the tenant is doing something wrong. They've breached terms in the lease, they set up a meth lab inside. So long story short, and there's more content coming, the end of the just cause, no fault protections is a big deal. What this means is for properties exempt from AB 1482, which includes most single-family homes, condos, and townhomes, those tenants will no longer have the protections in place of the eviction moratorium, which means that a landlord can terminate the tenancy. Why is this a big deal? This is a big deal because there are many landlords out there who want their rental properties back. They haven't been paid, and many of them at this point in time, they'll attempt to apply for rental assistance, but they don't care. They just want their properties back. So we expect a big flood of notices to terminate tenancy. And we have other content on the notice. That notice will be changing, and it'll go back to the old days where if a property is exempt from AB 1482, if it's a house, condo, or townhome, the landlord doesn't have to give any reason to terminate tenancy. Just a 60-day notice if the tenant's been there over a year, or a 30-day notice if it's there less. I tried to make this short, and there's a lot more to share on that, but that's a big deal. Things are changing for landlords and tenants and the dynamic in the relationship. Another big question, is it possible the eviction moratorium could return to California? And the short answer is yes. In fact, this video could be obsolete in just a few days. We saw this with the CDC eviction moratorium, where it expired, was reinstated, and then knocked down by the Supreme Court. Now, the Supreme Court at the national level or California level won't step in and end California's eviction moratorium if it starts up again. And here's the quick reason. There's a lot of misunderstanding, a lot of misinformation, but the quick reason is the CDC eviction moratorium was not set up by the legislature. It was set up by the Centers for Disease Control. In California, AB 832 and the previous bills were set up by the legislative branch. And that is the proper way to create legislation. So you can't necessarily challenge it on the face of it. There is a possibility the eviction moratorium could come back, but it will need to come from the legislature. It cannot come from an executive order, from the governor, or from the Judicial Council again. What are some next steps for California landlords and California tenants? Well, number one is if any back rent is owed, make sure you cooperate and apply at housingiskey.com. We have plenty of content on how to do that. And California landlords, before you make a move, whether it's terminate a tenancy or move forward with unlawful detainer, just as we've always said, you need an eviction attorney in your corner. Throughout the pandemic, there's been a ton of misinformation, and it has also come from attorneys who don't know what they're doing. And I hate to say that, but make sure you reach out and find an eviction attorney who knows what they're doing. If you let us know where you are, we can help you find a good eviction attorney. Thanks for all the trust you've put in us so far. It's been a long, long road to get to the end of the eviction moratorium. And there's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that landlords and tenants have put into both sides of this. We will continue to bring content that's relevant to tenants and landlords as things continue to change. If you found this update helpful, hit that like button and make sure you leave any other questions below and we'll reach out and get you an answer. Had you been subscribed to our free weekly email newsletter, you would have been kept in the loop on all these changes, so please make sure you click the link below to do that. Thanks for tuning in. This has been Christian Walsh, real estate agent with Wire Associates, and we appreciate you.